newsreader for the day, Matt Roberts, here on AOC Community Media. We bring the news to you every day in partnership with The Advocate, our local news reporters over at The Advocate. Today is Thursday, April 16th, day before the day I was born, actually. So tomorrow I'll be celebrating my birthday, but also Bruce Cohen will be back with us tomorrow, and also hopefully a special guest. So yeah, let's read the news for the day today. And today we're going to start off with some Acadiana business. So the headline is, Can Small Retailers Survive Slowdown? Some Acadiana businesses hoping online sales enough to make it. All right, we're good on Cypress. Thanks, Mandy. Thanks the whole AOC team. Thanks especially Mandy and Will, who are up every morning doing the news with us. It's been good to keep being able to provide the news as a community service. All right, so again, headline is, Can Small Retailers Survive Slowdown? Some Acadiana businesses hoping online sales enough to make it, by Adam Daigle, Acadiana business editor. Like most other non-grocery retail outlets in Acadiana and elsewhere, business is slow at Big Boy Toys and Hobbies. But it could be much worse. For people who are holed up inside their homes, it's time to fall back on old hobbies. And that's why business is down only about 30 to 35% for owners Jeremy and Melissa Truxillo. Even if customers can't come inside the store while stay-at-home mandates have been issued to stem the rise of COVID-19. The vast majority are our regular customers, said Jeremy, whose business is offering curbside service only. Some want parts for their cars. They're boarded up in their houses and probably bored out of their minds. Having their cars helps with people's sanity, he said. The Truxillos, sorry about that pronunciation, who are not utilizing their 3 employees but are still paying them, are doing their best to survive the economic slowdown caused by the coronavirus, which as of Wednesday has resulted in 1,103 deaths and 21,951 cases. Many experts believe it'll also result in a number of business closures and bankruptcies, as another recession is almost certain. National retailers, Models, and Pier 1 have put their bankruptcy proceedings on hold for now, according to a report from the retail website retaildive.com. March and April brought on a number of credit downgrades for retailers, and one expert said the country should see a historic number of bankruptcy filings across retail, restaurants, and hospitality sectors in the coming months. On Wednesday, the U.S. Department of Commerce reported retail sales for March were down 8.7% from February, the biggest one-month plunge in U.S. history. Sales at clothing stores, it noted, fell by more than half. Local retailers hope it doesn't get to the point of closing. The Truxillos are seeking help through the Paycheck Protection Program, which provides loans to businesses to cover payroll for up to 8 weeks. But so far, the results haven't been encouraging, Jeremy said. Not all banks were on board, he said. Banks only wanted to help their current customers. If you happen to bank with a bank that wasn't on board, you're just stuck. It's almost like the Hunger Games. There's a little amount of money and it's first come, first serve. If your bank is 3 weeks behind, well. Women's fashion retailer London E, that's London EE, which has downtown locations in both Rayne and Opelousas, has gone to online only since the mandates were issued. The store's online presence is only 2 months old, said co-owner Carissa Hayes, and it's generated some business, but it's not near what the foot traffic generated pre-COVID-19. We're affected like everyone else, trying to stay afloat and do what we've got to do to survive, Hayes said. We're on hold. People right now have no money to spend. They're all getting laid off. If they're getting laid off, they're not going to shop. Hayes hopes things start picking back up at the end of the month, meaning they won't have to entertain thoughts of whether or not the stores will survive. The Rayne store, which opened in 2016, did so well that it drew customers from Opelousas, and she and the other owners, Sister Tara Boone and Laura Mott, opened the store there in 2017. The group is leaning on faith to get them through. It can be scary, but I'm hoping the future holds, and I'm trying to stay positive, Hayes said. I don't foresee us closing. That's not even in our mind right now. That's not even a possibility. I'm just being hopeful. If it happens, it's God's plan, and we have to close. We have to close. The power of prayer can keep us rolling. At the Gentry Supply Company in downtown Lafayette, owner Ross Fontenot has also shifted to online sales after the social distancing mandates were issued in March. His store has been online for about a year, and like other clothing retailers, it can be difficult on the surface to sell clothes to people who can't try them on. So Fontenot, who is offering free returns and a 20% discount on the entire web store. Sales have been slow, he noted, but he understands. Overall, I don't expect people to spend a lot of money right now, he said. Some people just lost their jobs, and I completely understand that. But for those who haven't and want to support the local economy, I invite that. Us retailers are kind of in the same boat. It's different that food is an essential item, but whereas clothing is not. Hopefully, people can make up for lost time when things pick up. We're all just trying to figure it out and take one day at a time as well. At Littletown Boutique in the Oil Center, owner Mary Jane Johnson and her daughter Amy Chapuis closed the store over a month ago. Johnson and her husband opened the store 14 years ago after first opening a store in Tallulah, where she and her husband have stayed since the Lafayette store closed. Now, in its fourth week of closing, the store will reopen regardless of how many more weeks it will be closed, said Johnson, who opened Tallulah's store 38 years ago. This has been tough, she said. I feel like this is so much bigger than Littletown's bottom line. We've made the best of our situation, knowing this too will come to an end. I'm trusting in the Lord, and I don't take that lightly. We will absolutely be there with bells on when we can reopen. That's some good high spirits, good optimistic outlook from local businesses. I encourage anyone who can support local businesses, that are not grocery stores and are having a hard time as well right now. The next story, Governor, masks may be required for some workers. CDC now recommending that people will wear them in public. This is by Will Centel. Governor John Bel Edwards said Wednesday that although he has no immediate plans to require the use of masks in public to combat the coronavirus, restaurant and other workers may be directed to do so. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, I'll let this truck pass here. I am reading the news outside today, so a little extra outside noise might happen. All right, so again, back to the story about masks, quoting Governor John Bel Edwards, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, in a change from its earlier stance, has recommended that people wear masks in public, and the governor has too. However, some states are mandating their use generally or while visiting certain areas like grocery stores. Whether I would mandate individuals to wear a mask, I'm not certain, Edwards said. We're going to look at what the CDC recommendations are on this. The governor's stay-at-home order, which applies to all but essential workers, extends through April 30th. Edwards has said repeatedly that what happens next will be announced several days before the end of the month, but that it is too soon to tell how any directives will be loosened. The governor said he has been generally pleased by the number of people wearing protection to help combat the spread of the virus. I am told that more individuals are choosing to wear a mask in public, Edwards said. It is something we should wrap our minds around. That's my cat, Sam. He's not in trouble. He's just loud. It is going to be normal for some time. The governor traveled to Monroe and other parts of the northeast Louisiana after tornadoes touched down on Easter Sunday. When I was in Monroe, nobody came close to where I was that didn't have a mask on, Edwards said. I'm not sure if that is the way it is everywhere. Edwards made his comments during his daily briefing on the virus, and he formally issued his proclamation that public schools will not reopen in the current academic year. Acting State Superintendent of Education Beth Ciano, who appeared with Edwards, said, key issues will be left to local educators, including assessments on where students stand academically and whether summer school classes are needed. The governor emphasized that distance learning will continue in schools statewide, either high or low tech. This is not the end of learning for the academic year, he said. It's just the end of students going to physical campuses for the remainder of the spring semester. Remote learning will continue, and we will all work together to make sure that our students do not fall behind academically. In addition, we expect that school systems will continue to provide nutrition and meals for students. CNO said educators are to use the final 6 weeks of the school year to identify learning level of students, a key concern. She also said officials are to map plans for any additional academic time. Some superintendents have suggested summer school as a way to address possible learning gaps, especially because internet access varies statewide and makes online education impossible in some areas. CNO said whether the widespread summer school classes are needed is also best left to district-level educators. Sandy Holloway, president of the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, said Wednesday she has named 2 Bessie members, Preston Castile and Ashley Ellis, to serve as liaisons with the state's Department of Education on how academics will unfold amid the school's closure. Edwards announced earlier this week that public schools would remain closed for the rest of the academic year, which had been scheduled to close in late May. The governor initially shuttered schools effective March 16th as part of efforts to stem the spread of the virus, and later extended his order through April 30th. The move to keep classrooms closed was backed by the Louisiana Association of School Superintendents, Leaders of Bessie, and the Louisiana School Boards Association. All 3 groups said health concerns prompted their call, as well as practical problems restarting schools for what would generally be for 3 weeks. State education leaders have said that action is needed to avoid students missing 9 weeks of classroom instruction, but Danny P. Garrett III, an attorney for Louisiana School Boards Association, said that is overstating the gap. In an email, Garrett noted that standardized tests were set to run through April 9. Most districts plan to take off the following week, and that there is very little academic instruction that takes place after the end-of-year assessments have been completed. The point remains that as a practical matter, students only lost 2 weeks of instruction prior to the beginning of the end-of-year assessments, he said. The annual exams were canceled because of the coronavirus. In our next headline, Edwards says sports won't look the same, by Christian Clark and Amy Just. Governor John Bel Edwards didn't want to speak just yet on whether fans will be in attendance for New Orleans Saints and college football games this fall, but he did say Wednesday afternoon that if sporting events are back in session, the fan experience will be different. Edwards, notably a fan of the Saints and LSU, said he has personal aspirations of games returning this fall, but he's just not prepared at all to go down that road to talk about what the situation will be this fall, when it's still mid-April. If the games resume and fans are in attendance, Edwards said, the fan experience is still not going to look exactly the same. There are going to have to be some precautions taken, and what those might look like, I don't know. Edwards theorized that maybe every other seat or every third seat will be sold rather than every seat. Or maybe places like Mercedes-Benz Superdome and LSU's Tiger Stadium will need to devise new entrance and exit plans. Or, Edwards theorized, maybe temperature checks and mask requirements will be put into place. I just don't know, Edwards said as a disclaimer, but I can certainly see myself in Tiger Stadium because that's where I want to be, yelling for the Tigers so that they can successfully defend their national championship. On Wednesday morning, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the leading public health expert on White House's coronavirus task force, said he believes there is a way major sports could be back later this year. In an interview on the Snapchat show Good Luck America, Fauci told host Peter Hamby he could see the NBA, NFL, and Major League Baseball returning sooner rather than later, provided they are not playing in front of crowds. There's a way of doing that, Fauci said. Nobody comes to the stadium, put them in big hotels wherever you want to play, keep them very well surveilled, have them tested like every week, and make sure they don't wind up infecting them or their family, and let them play the season out. Timetables for the return of major sports are still unclear. The NFL draft is next week, but the 2020 regular season isn't scheduled to begin until September 10th, and the league's full week-by-week, team-by-team schedule isn't set to be released until May. New Orleans Mayor Latoya Cantrell recommended Tuesday that all large festivals in the city be pushed back to 2021, but she came short of recommending the same for New Orleans Saints games. Asked specifically about the Saints, who play their home games in the 76,000-seat Superdome, Cantrell said the NFL as a whole is struggling with those decisions. The Saints and Pelicans said Tuesday they were aware of Cantrell's comments. "We are preparing to play, and we are being very proactive in working with healthcare professionals, our medical staff, and both the NBA and NFL," said Greg Bensell, Senior Vice President of Communications for the Saints and Pelicans. "In addition, we are in constant contact with local and state government. When we return this season, our highest priority will be the health and safety of our fans, staff, players, and coaches. It is what we need to do, and we are doing relative to planning to play, and we will be ready." Bensell added that the economic impact of Saints games is important, and considering the economic and cultural significance of the Saints, we are working to do everything in our power to make it work. It's too important for our city, he said. The Pelicans' regular season was suspended March 11th, and later that month, ESPN reported that the NBA was exploring the possibility of holding games at a central location where players would sleep, train, eat, and hopefully be kept healthy enough to have confidence in resuming play. The Pelicans were among a pack of teams jockeying for the Western Conference's final playoff spot before the play was suspended. They had 18 remaining games to make up the 3.5-game difference between them and the Grizzlies, who were in 8th place. The Pelicans were supposed to play their final regular season game Wednesday in San Antonio. It's still unclear how many, if any, regular season games will be made up. Last week, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver said the league will not provide any updates about returning to play until May 1st at the earliest. "Initially, through the first week, 2 weeks, we are looking at more specific scenarios," Silver said. "If we start this date, what would it mean for the regular season? When would the playoffs begin? When would they conclude? And again, what I've learned over the past few weeks is we just have too little information to make those sorts of projections. And if and when the NBA season resumes, players will need time to get back into shape. They are not allowed inside team practice facilities, which means if they want to work out, they must do so at home. Many players don't have access to hoops. The Pelicans are doing what they can to keep players in shape by holding workouts via Zoom 5 days per week, but there is no substitute for playing 5-on-5 basketball. I think there would be a pretty unanimous sentiment that the longer we're out, the longer we're going to need," Pelicans Executive Vice President David Griffin said. If games are played in empty stadiums, Fauci predicted there will still be a healthy appetite for them. He admitted he misses seeing his hometown team play. I'll take a little sip of coffee. You'll all be glad to know that Sam the cat is no longer meowing at me. He figured out how to jump over the short gate that we have, and he is now sitting in the sunlight on the deck. So, let's see. Our next story will be Emergency Election Plan Blocked by Republicans by Sam Carlin. Louisiana Republican lawmakers on Wednesday blocked an emergency election plan that would expand mail-in voting and early voting and make other changes to the state's delayed presidential primary election because of the coronavirus pandemic. The move thrust Louisiana into a partisan debate playing out across the country over whether to use mail-in voting and other measures recommended by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to reduce the risks associated with holding in-person elections amid an epidemic that has taken more than 25,000 lives across the country. Republican Secretary of State Kyle Ardoin, who crafted the plan after negotiations with Democratic Governor John Bel Edwards and some legislative leaders, proposed extending mail-in ballots to people affected by the coronavirus and expanding early voting, among other precautions. While he warned he was facing fast-approaching deadlines for acquiring new supplies for the election, Ardoin faced stiff resistance from his own party, with a Louisiana GOP official calling it too extreme because of the additional categories of people who would qualify for an absentee vote. The Republican lawmaker echoed President Donald Trump, who has claimed absentee ballots invite fraud, though experts say voter fraud is extremely rare. It is extremely broad and basically covers everyone in Louisiana, and State Senator Barry Milligan, Republican Shreveport, said State Senator. There is not an election cycle that goes through that we wake up to the news that the votes are found in somebody's garage or somebody's truck, said Milligan. On a 5-to-1 party line vote, the Senate and Governmental Affairs Committee rejected an emergency certification that would allow Ardoin to move forward with the plan after a more than 3-hour hearing at the state capitol. The House and Governmental Affairs Committee later approved the emergency certification and deferred action on the plan after Ardoin said he would work with legislators to try and reach a compromise. The plan would allow several categories of people who don't normally qualify for absentee ballots to cast their vote by mail. That includes those with serious underlying health conditions, those 60 or older, people subject to stay-at-home, quarantine, or isolation orders, those experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and seeking a medical diagnosis, or those who are unable to appear in public because of concerns they were exposed to the virus, among others. Some Democratic lawmakers, many of whom want to see universal mail-in ballots to enfranchise more voters during the pandemic, complained that the effort didn't go far enough but still offered up their support. State Representative Mandy Landry, Democrat New Orleans, who is pushing a bill to expand mail-in ballots to all voters, noted many people have family members with underlying health conditions who could be put at risk if elections go forward without changes. Edwards, at a news conference Wednesday, said nobody should have to choose between exercising their right to vote and potentially endangering themselves or others, and said he hopes lawmakers reconsider. The fate of the state's elections, now set for July 11th for the presidential primary and August 15th for local general elections after 2 delays, is up in the air. Ardoin said in an interview he would work with lawmakers and the governor to try to craft a compromise, but he noted he faces a drop-dead deadline to buy equipment on April 24th. The full House and Senate must also approve the plan. I hear what they're saying, Ardoin said. I think some of their concerns are not steeped in all the facts that were presented to them today. I'm hoping over time there can be some clarity. The emergency plan would only apply to the delayed spring elections, but public health officials have warned the coronavirus could make a resurgence in the cooler fall weather, when the country is slated to have a presidential election in November. Edwards this week said he expected officials would conduct the late summer elections with new restrictions and reevaluate. While the presidential primaries are settled, Louisiana still must participate to certify its delegate allocation to the conventions, Ardoin said. Plus, local tax and bond propositions on the ballot can't be delayed any further. Officials on both sides of the issue said they wanted to avoid an election similar to the one conducted by Wisconsin, where Republican lawmakers blocked a proposal by Democratic governor to expand mail-in voting and delay the state's elections. Voters went to the polls and waited in long lines earlier this month in that state amid a pandemic that has prompted officials across the country to shutter businesses and urge people to stay home. Ardoin said that if all sides can't agree on an emergency plan, this state's elections could look like Wisconsin's. It could potentially put us in that position, he said. I'm hoping it doesn't. Right now, that's the position we're in. Ardoin stressed that his plan would not mail ballots to all voters. They would have to request the absentee ballots, and he noted it would be temporary. While Trump has railed against mail-in voting because he says it perpetuates voter fraud, studies have shown while there is slightly higher risk of fraud with mail-in ballots, the risk is still extremely low. According to the Brennan Center for Justice, it is still more likely for an American to be struck by lightning than to commit mail voting fraud. Senate and Governmental Affairs Chairwoman Sharon Hewitt, Republican Slidell, said in a statement after the vote, she is confident the various sides can come to an agreement on a reasonable plan that protects our election process and responds adequately to challenges that might occur during this pandemic. Louisiana presidential primary was initially scheduled for April 4, but was delayed by Edwards at the request of Ardoin until June 20. This week, Edwards delayed the elections again until July and the subsequent general election in August. All right. Our next story is headlined, 11 ICE staffers at Alexandria Airport test positive. 11 U.S. this is by Brinstol, 11 U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement staffers at the agency's facility at the Alexandria Airport have tested positive for coronavirus, the largest outbreak among staff at any ICE facility nationwide. The ICE Alexandria staging facility is normally used as a holding pen for immigration detainees as they await deportation flights out of the Alexandria International Airport. ICE Air, the agency's charter deportation airline, uses the airport as a hub for dedicated deportation flights to Central America. ICE has continued operating deportation flights out of Alexandria as normal despite the coronavirus crisis, said Bryn Cox, an ICE spokesperson. An ICE spokesman, that's Brian Cox. But ICE is no longer holding detainees at airport staging facility in the wake of the outbreak among staffers, Cox said, instead driving busloads of them from ICE detention facilities across Louisiana directly onto the tarmac to board flights. It's unclear what might have triggered the outbreak, Cox. Cox said no one in ICE custody with a known coronavirus infection moved through the facility. ICE employees are still working out of the offices there processing paperwork for the deportation flights, Cox said. The Alexandria airstrip is only an international airport by dint of ICE Air's sizable operation there. Commercial airlines operate flights from Alexandria International to only a handful of domestic destinations, including Atlanta, Dallas, and Houston. ICE Air has flown U.S. citizens stranded abroad home on the return legs of deportation flights. Cox said the State Department is coordinating those flights and that people flown back to the United States on flights are responsible for arranging their own way home once they land in Louisiana. At least 5 people held at ICE detention facilities in Louisiana have tested positive for coronavirus, including people held at Richwood Correctional Center near Monroe, Wynn Correctional Center in Winfield, and LaSalle Correctional Center in Olea. Another detainee at the Adams County Correctional Center just across the Mississippi state line in Natchez also tested positive, according to the agency. People loaded onto deportation flights are screened for fevers before being cleared to board, Cox said, and the agency won't deport anyone who's currently ill. Cox said detainees who have potentially been exposed to coronavirus are housed together in cohorts at detention centers for at least 14 days. ICE is reviewing the cases of people at high risk from coronavirus, primarily elderly or people with serious underlying health conditions who are currently locked in immigration detention, Cox said. A total of 693 people had been released from detention centers nationwide as of April 10th, Cox said. As of earlier this month, ICE was holding over 33,000 people across the country, including illegal immigrants facing possible deportation and asylum seekers who've traveled from around the world to seek refuge in the United States. But immigration rights groups have said those steps are not nearly enough. The ACLU and Southern Poverty Law Center decried sanitary conditions in Louisiana immigration detention centers and asked federal judge in Washington to order ICE to release asylum seekers. The new lawsuit, on behalf of people held at 6 ICE detention centers in Louisiana, called lockups notoriously overcrowded and unhealthy, and the possibility of deadly coronavirus outbreaks inevitable. All right, and looks like some good news for Louisiana small businesses. Louisiana headline, Louisiana small businesses see some relief, some still frustrated with chaotic SBA loan program, by Anthony McCauley. The government check for Mr. Mudbug Inc. cleared on Wednesday, providing emergency funds for the Kenner-based food manufacturer that will allow the company to keep its 70 employees paid for the next 2 months and possibly survive the corona crisis. Mike Manza, founder and president of the 34-year-old food company, said the forgivable loan of around $300,000 that he was able to raise under Small Business Administration's hastily established Paycheck Protection Program is a godsend as he scrambles to keep his prepared food business going until the state lifts the lockdown in place to mitigate the pandemic and allows restaurants, bars, and hotels to resume normal service. It reminded me of the time after Katrina when we could leave our FEMA trailer, Mainza said. I was very, very happy when I found out we got funded and we could keep our team together. Mr. Mudbug is one of the lucky businesses that have been approved for the loans, part of the federal government's $2.2 trillion emergency economic stimulus plan. The program, which began on April 3rd, provides loans via commercial banks of up to $10 million at a 1% annual interest rate for businesses to meet payroll and certain operating expenses, including rents, mortgages, and utilities, with the portion used for payroll forgivable. As of Friday, the SBA said just over 17,000 Louisiana businesses had been approved for about $3.7 billion in Paycheck Protection Program loans. Nationally, over 1 million loans for more than $247 billion have been approved. Although business owners like Mainza were able to overcome some initial glitches with the application forms and get their funds fairly quickly, other businesses have hit obstacles. Lisa Lesko said she and her husband Barry, who own the Seafood Source of Louisiana, a fish wholesaler in Baton Rouge, have been trying for weeks to get their loan application through their bank, Capital One. For 2 weeks, they have been working out the kinks, she wrote in an email. This is unacceptable as these loans were designed to be a quick bridge to allow employers to keep their employees. We value our employee family and do not wish to pursue layoffs, but time and money are running low. Capital One didn't respond to a request for comment. It's a story shared by many businesses in Louisiana and around the country. Some businesses have found their applications were able to move through the process quickly, while other times there were complications that made the process drag on. Craig Betzer, who employs about 20 electricians at Kastner Electric in New Orleans, said he'd spent about 3 weeks trying to get Hancock Whitney, the company's main bank for the past 15 years, to help process his SBA applications. A big part of his payroll each month is a payment into the National Electrical Benefit Fund to cover pension and health benefits for unionized electricians, he said, and that seemed to cause an issue. I told them, I'm not a banker, I'm an electrician, and if I don't get this loan, I'm not going to be open, Betzer said of his growing frustration, especially when he read news reports that $349 billion first round of the loans was on course to be exhausted sometime this week. Hancock Whitney didn't respond to a request for comment. This week he turned to First Bank and Trust, a small New Orleans-based community bank with which he had no previous relationship. Betzer said the bank processed his line in less than 2 days. Don Starnes, the Louisiana director for the National Federation of Independent Business, a small business advocacy organization, said the state's small businesses have so far been shortchanged by the program. Although 17,000 or so businesses may have received loans, that still leaves a great swath of 430,000 or so small businesses in the state that are still waiting on help, she said. The feedback we've heard is that some of the bigger banks and regional banks haven't been responsive, Starnes said. One member I heard from had a long-term relationship with one of the big bank groups and went ahead with a community bank where they didn't have a relationship and have been approved. For many banks, the low interest rates of the loans may make them unprofitable business, or low profit at best. Some small banks say they are nevertheless an opportunity to pull in new clients from bigger competitors, even if the loans themselves don't add to their bottom line. Gary Blossman, CEO of First Bank and Trust, said the low interest rate loans may not be enough to cover the cost of processing them, but his bank has been determined to sign up as many customers as it can. Last night, we had done 250 applicants for a total of $65 million. As of 10 this morning, that was up to 360, he said Wednesday. The bank normally processes 70 commercial loans a month. After all the technical glitches early on, Blossman said, it's going a lot faster now and we're pumping out as many as we can before the funding runs out. But even for companies that have been lucky enough to have their loans go through smoothly, they are still struggling to stay afloat. All right, and here's a little story about Festival International, our good buddies over at Festival International. Headline reads, Festival International goes virtual. Organizers, event will offer online music, market, and takeout. By Megan Wyatt, staff writer for The Advocate. A few of the vibrant sights, sounds, and flavors you love most about Festival International de Louisiana will be available at home in the form of a virtual event, and soon, like next weekend soon. Festival organizers released details Wednesday about what a virtual version of Lafayette's biggest annual event will look like. There will of course be music, but there will also be festival punch, and possibly crawfish, spinach bread bowls too. Many details are still being finalized, but here are the basics. 2-hour curated musical performances will stream via Facebook on 3 nights, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Special collaborative songs are being recorded this week that involve multiple musicians performing and recording in their quarantine locations to create a layered track. Highlight reels of festival performances from previous years will air in the hours leading up to the live performances. Takeout and delivery of some festival foods and even drinks will be available. An online market with some festival fine arts and world arts vendors is possible. A flexible 5K will take place on any route and any time during the festival. Last month, festival organizers announced the cancellation of the 34th annual event set to take place April 22nd through 26th in downtown Lafayette because of the coronavirus pandemic. They said they were still exploring all available options, including rescheduling for the fall or hosting it virtually, but they were not sure of the feasibility at the time. It was obviously an emotional time, said Scott Freehan, executive director of the Festival International, in a phone interview this week. Not just for us, but for everybody, for the community. We were all in shock. It actually took us a while to flip our creative juices back on. But once we got over the shock, it just snowballed into this thing that's been met by enthusiasm from our entire staff. We're really excited to give something cool and positive to the community right now. Festival organizers have been furiously working through logistics with musicians, vendors, sponsors, and countless others who make the event a reality each year. They're partnering with Acadiana Open Channel to create a virtual event that will take place on mobile devices and television screens. It's been a whirlwind of 2 weeks for those involved. The bands and performers have been booked for months. Same for the food, beverage, and art vendors, and the sponsors. The list goes on and on. Plans were all set for usual 5-day downtown music festival where tens of thousands of people may meander through the streets. It's taken some creative thinking and hard work to distill the beloved Lafayette Festival into a virtual event in only a few weeks. There's still a lot of work for us to do to put it all together, Freehan said, but we realized we were capable technically, and now we have the framework, all the pieces, and we're putting it all together. The virtual program schedule will include intimate concerts streamed on Facebook from international and local musicians on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights. In the afternoon hours leading up to the headline performances, the Acadiana Open Channel, or AOC Community Media, as you all know it, will broadcast highlights from more than 30 years worth of Festival International. One of the best parts of Festival is the element of surprise, perhaps bumping into an old friend, stilt walker, or second line on Jefferson Street, so organizers aren't revealing everything just yet. They're teasing to an international collaborative surprise, Fest fan contests, limited edition merchandise, and interactive experiences. They're also encouraging people to fly their Festival International flags, wear their festy dresses and t-shirts, display their pins and posters, and indulge in their favorite foods and drinks ahead of and during the virtual event. We feel that the magic in the air during Festival International is a force that cannot and should not be stopped, said Carly Vietar, the festival's marketing director, in a prepared statement. Flags are still flying and the playlist is still playing today, but we wanted to create something special. We invite you all to join us in celebration from your own home and tune in to our 3-day virtual festival. Cafe 20.3 in Legends locations will be selling gallons of festival punch, which include the iconic souvenir cups and limited edition merchandise next week. Some of the food vendors will be selling their festival favorites via takeout or delivery services next week, but specifics aren't yet available. Festival International's success is heavily reliant on alcohol and merchandise sales. Without a physical event, the nonprofit will struggle to stay afloat in the months or even years ahead. Those with the financial means are encouraged to support Festival International via Guardian Angels Fund through the Community Foundation of Acadiana. Fian said Fian and his team have been working with musicians, vendors, sponsors, and others who were paid deposits ahead of the event. Most have been willing to transfer deposits to future events. We're going to take a big hit this year for sure, no matter how we slice it, Fian said. But we've been able to get some deposits back or work hand in hand with folks. They're getting hammered too. All their events are canceled like ours. We want them to be around next year just like they want us to be around next year. We're all taking this approach. What can we apply to next year? Because we're truly in this together. Fian hasn't been able to focus on the financial side of things too much. The festival is next weekend after all. Audio files are traveling across the globe as musicians record and overlay their performances with other artists to create collaborative songs for the event. Earlier this week, Fian listened to one of the songs that will close out the virtual festival. The finale is going to be killer, Fian said. I got goosebumps when I saw the first track. Sudanese-American musician Sing Kane is one of the headliners recording this week for the finale. He's known for upbeat, undeniably catchy tunes that capture deeper pains. His 2016 song called Uh-Huh is a great one to listen to ahead of the virtual festival. Times are tough, struggles have always existed in our lives, but hope, love, and the power of positivity help us stay alive. Ahmed Galeb, who goes by the stage name Sinkane, told NPR when he released the song. It is what inspires me to wake up in the morning, make music, and ultimately connect with people. And with phrases like, it's all going to be all right, and we're all going to make it right, the song's message is more relevant now than ever before. Festival International music lineup, along with more details about food, drinks, and merchandise, will be released next week. Visit festivalinternational.org to learn more. And we are glad at AOC Community Media to be able to partner up with Festival. We've done it for all these years now in covering the festival, and we're glad to be able to partner with them in this little bit of virtual relief in this weird time of health emergency. But good job, Acadiana, for sticking to it and for looking good at our numbers there. All right, Lafayette Airport to receive $2.8 million in federal relief aid by Adam Daigle, Acadiana business editor. The Lafayette Regional Airport has been awarded more than $2.8 million as a part of the Federal Aviation Administration's granting over $83 million in relief for airports nationwide in response to the coronavirus. Lafayette Airport will be awarded $2,862,075 as part of the Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Security Act, an effort to provide relief to American families, workers, and businesses. The funding will support continued operations and replace lost revenue resulting from the sharp decline in passenger traffic and other airport business due to the public health emergency. The funds are available for airport capital expenditures, airport operating expenses, including payroll and utilities, and the airport debt payments. In recent weeks, airport officials have limited capital expenses and left vacant positions unfilled, Director Steve Piku said. The airport has not furloughed employees or reduced staff. Passenger count at the Lafayette Airport has plunged since the coronavirus, down to 9,277 enplanements and 10,457 deplanements in March, after reporting 21,399 enplanements and 21,392 deplanements in February 2019. It also dropped from 4,110 passengers the week of March 1 through 7 to just 557 the final week of March, an 86.4% drop. The CARES Act also provides funds to increase the federal share to $100,000 for grants awarded under the fiscal year 2020 Appropriations for Airport Improvement Program and supplemental discretionary grants. Under normal circumstances, grant recipients contribute a matching percentage of the project costs. Providing this additional funding and eliminating the local share will allow critical safety and capacity projects to continue as planned regardless of airport sponsors' current financial circumstances. The Acadiana Regional Airport in New Iberia and airports in Opelousas, Eunice, Abbeville, Crowley, and Patterson were each awarded $30,000. All right. Looks like we got at least one more story here. Let me take a little sip of coffee. I'll apologize about that. Sounds like a chainsaw is going on down my street. You probably can't hear the sprinkler, but there's a sprinkler too. But it is a beautiful day out here. Some nice weather, so go out on your front lawn or your back deck and check that out, because that is a nice sight. Speaking of nice sights, our next headline, Cajun musician tests negative for coronavirus. Zachary Richard urges people to remain vigilant. This story is also by Megan Wyatt. Cajun singer-songwriter Zachary Richard has tested negative for the novel coronavirus. My coronavirus test results are in, negative, no virus detected, Richard wrote in a Sunday post on his official Facebook page. Richard took a COVID-19 test late last week because of public concern prompted by an April 5th news story by a Canadian French-language radio network. The 69-year-old musician said during a radio interview with the ICI premiere that he chose to self-quarantine at his Scott home because he had been feeling a little sick, although he did not have signature symptoms of the virus. He told Franco Nuovo, the host of Dessine-moi un dimanche, that he had chosen to isolate primarily out of concern for his 98-year-old mother. He is one of a few caregivers. Look, it's better than yesterday, and I think it's going to be even better tomorrow, Richard said during the show, which translates to Draw Me a Sunday. Richard said the radio station shared misinformation after the segment that he had tested positive for COVID-19. The musician said he did discuss the coronavirus crisis in Louisiana, which he described as surreal. Please remain vigilant and protect yourselves and your loved ones, Richard wrote in his Sunday Facebook post. Stay strong and be well. So that's good that Zach Richard tested negative. Good. All right, let's see here. I have time for maybe one more story. All right, so here we go. COVID-19 coronavirus the latest. Virus spreads to Gulf oil platforms by Sarah Sneath. Although an oil rig far out in the Gulf of Mexico might seem like an unlikely place for the coronavirus to take root, more than 24 offshore workers on 7 out of 680 platforms have now tested positive for the virus, according to the U.S. Coast Guard. Close quarters, shared mess halls, and frequently touched surfaces such as handrails and handheld radios make it difficult to stop the spread of the virus once it arrives on a facility. While the federal agency that regulates energy production offshore has not established any guidelines, industry groups have created some best practices to decrease the chance that the virus will find its way onto another platform. They say more widespread testing would further enable them to operate safely through the pandemic. The Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement has not established any protocols for what companies should or must do when an offshore worker displays symptoms of the coronavirus, said Sandy Day, an agency spokesman. The agency is working to develop mitigations to reduce the risk of exposure for its own employees traveling offshore, he said, 4 of whom have tested positive for the coronavirus. 3 have since recovered and have been released from quarantine. 1 employee is under medical care. The agency is continuing inspections and permitting of offshore facilities during the pandemic, Day said. BP is among the companies that has had offshore workers test positive for the coronavirus, said Jason Ryan, a company spokesman. The workers were already on shore when they got their test results. The platform has since been cleaned and the crew has rotated, Ryan said. The company has also implemented a health screening process and 5-day quarantine for all workers before they go offshore. The safety and well-being of staff and contractors and respect for the communities in which we operate is our highest priority, Ryan said. The Offshore Operators Committee, a member organization of energy companies operating in the Gulf of Mexico, created a tip sheet for reducing the spread of the virus. Suggested mitigation measures include pre-screening before workers are brought to platforms, cleaning of off-touch surfaces on the platforms, and planning for quarantine and specialized transportation for any people on board who exhibit symptoms. The measures appear to be working, said Eric Melito, president of the National Ocean Industries Association. In the past 2 weeks, there have been 11 COVID-19 cases detected in roughly 15,000 people who work offshore at any given time, he said Monday. We see what we think are great results, he said. I think that's due to the seriousness and the commitment we've seen. As of April 8th, 26 offshore workers in the Gulf had tested positive for the coronavirus, according to the U.S. Coast Guard, which has been unwilling to provide updates since then. Questions by phone and by email to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention for more current numbers were not returned. Although Melito is heartened by the low numbers so far, he noted that offshore workers, like others, have experienced difficulty in getting tested for the coronavirus. That's why industry groups have made requests at the federal and state level for testing to be made available for their workers. It's our goal to get everyone tested, he said. They're essential workers and are in a confined setting. All right, and so there is a call out there from the Acadian Advocate, acts of kindness. There's a staff report, and they say this is a tough time for us all, but that hasn't stopped people from reaching out to lend a helping hand. For upcoming stories we're calling acts of kindness, we want to know about them. It can be big or small. Some neighbors buying each other groceries, a laid-off worker getting a little help with bills, running errands for those who are housebound, a friend or family member reaching out to see how you are doing, etc. If you want to be a part of the Advocate's coverage, you can send those acts of kindness to theadvocate.com. Site forms acts of kindness. And yeah, you can send, if you want to put those on video, you can also send those to AOC Community Media. If you go to aocinc.org/watch, you can submit your media. Maybe you want to give a message to your community and share it on the TV, a message of hope or a message of health or a message of well-being. We are here to take that video. We will take it via an online form, of course, just to remain nice and safe and socially distant. But if you want to stay socially in touch, you can reach out to us at 337-232-4434, where we are still taking your phone calls. You can email us at info@aocinc.org. If you have production-specific questions, you can email me or any of the other production team at production@aocinc.org. We hope you're all staying safe out there. We hope you're all doing all right and following CDC guidelines to help keep the numbers of people with the virus down in Louisiana and keep our hardworking healthcare professionals safe and not in a bad spot where they can help to take care of those of us who do happen to contract the virus, or those of us who are ill otherwise. Thanks to all the healthcare workers out there. Thanks to all of you for doing a good job of being kind to each other and keeping each other safe and healthy in this time. And take care of yourselves. We will join you tomorrow morning. Bruce Cohen will be back, technology gods permitting. We will have Bruce, and maybe he mentioned a special guest tomorrow morning, so we'll keep that a surprise. You guys tune in. My name's Matt Roberts. This is AOC Community Media and Cypress Street Radio. Thanks for listening and watching, and have a good day.